like that. He spends time in the forest, and
Close enough.
Yeah.
He's very foresty.
All right. And she's an environmentalist and, California girl. And she and I don't agree much on anything other than we like each other. And her husband popped in one day, and he got to have a beer, and he got to charge the Fish and Wildlife Parks, whatever, because it's still on the books that they can have a beer, and the government will pay for it. They can have one beer at lunch. So I thought that would be fun. And then Jillian and I and Kathy and Tara and the whole group got to do a fun wine tasting up at Bob's Bar in Nyhart, which is about as redneck as you can get in the world, especially in Montana in general, is maybe a little more rednecky. But so I don't know what Jillian and I and Tara and her husband and Kathy, we just hit it off. And then she moved back to Paso Robles because I don't know why. She could tell that, I guess. But we miss her and we loved her and we still love her. And she still sends Tara and I texts. She just had a baby about the same age as Hazel Ray. And so we've had a lot of fun over the years with Jillian. And she was the one that she went back to Paso Robles and got to go to work again. Not again, but go to work with our winemaker tonight, her husband. And so that's how this whole setup happened. And so we get to meet a cool lady. We got to spend a little time on the phone today. And yes, I have a script, but look, now it's written on little yellow paper by hand. I'm not typing it, not being so formal. And so we have, help me with the pronunciation, please. Valia?
Velia.
So,
like Vail, Colorado. Velia.
But
so I answered
Velia
it.
Is from the winery called Desparada. So I thought maybe we'd start with you just kind of telling us about what's going on, how you got in the wine business, your background, whatever personal information you want to share to start with, just about you.
Awesome. Thanks for the invite. And thanks for having me. It's great to meet you all virtually. I've not yet been to Montana, but I've heard good things from Kyle especially, and Jillian. I started in wine when I was 18. I worked in fine dining restaurants and I caught the bug early like a lot of people do, and went into sales after that, worked for a wine brokerage based out of Germany, and then lived up in Canada. So I know winter a bit, and decided to work on importing and bringing wine up into Southern Ontario. And so it's been all of those years kind of working on the sales and marketing side of wine, and did some education stuff as well. Went for a WSET program towards a Master's of Wine degree, but had never done production up until about 2007. And at that point, after 4 winters in Canada, I tapped out, decided I wasn't cut for, I wasn't quite hardy enough for it. I liked too much of this. And I decided to move back and bought a small trailer and moved on to a vineyard, and learned how to make wine by getting a job in the cellar and just doing. And then 2009 started this brand, and then fast forward now to, I guess it's 11 years later. Hold on, I lost your audio.
No.
Oh,
I
there
keep
you are.
hitting unmute and mute. I've only been doing this for 15 days. It's not.
We are all adjusting, Mark. We are all adjusting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about the brand name Desparada and kind of what happened there, and what's this about?
Yeah, the branding is one of the hardest things. I feel like wine actually is pretty easy in the big scheme of things, but the marketing and the branding and the whole brand identity is actually incredibly challenging. It's hard to find something that speaks to who you are and that evokes what you're trying to portray in your product and your art. It was a really hard thing. So luckily I had a friend named Philip Muzzy, which is how we met Jillian, and originally from, Michigan. And he had this company that this is what they did, was design amazing labels and stickers and brands. And they decided to take me on, and we kind of did talked about why we're doing this and what we want. And that was the name they came up with. And it's kind of a feminine version of a desperado, which is kind of a made up thing anyways, but someone that marches to their own beat, if you will, does their own thing, tries to be a badass. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
That's funny. Um, so why did you end up in Paso, or what happened there?
When I decided to move back to the States and I really wanted to do the production side of things, the reality was that I had absolutely $0, less than $0, minus $0. So Napa wasn't going to work for me. And that whole like Northern California, it's beautiful and there's beautiful wines, but there's a real barrier to entry from a financial standpoint. And I had been to Paso probably 15 years prior to that on a wine trip, and just remembered it being very rugged and very down to earth and very welcoming. And so I literally just picked up and moved and kind of figured it out as I went. And it has been. It's a beautiful community of really warm, gorgeous people that are very supportive, and it still has a real small town feel. It's very collaborative. It's very positive. We have beautiful weather. It's very sunny. We grow good grapes. But yeah, it's a good spot.
Yeah, Jillian actually sent us there. I think maybe we used to take the first week off, and we had Bo Bianchi on earlier, and I kind of told the story, but some of you weren't on. So the rest of you just be bored if you have to be. We got to go we spent I think about a week in Santa Barbara, and then we went up to SLO, which is San Luis Obispo. It's like calling whitefish the fish or hungry horse the horse. So
well, it sounds like you know. If you call it slow, you're in the know.
Oh, I know, right? That was all Jillian. So we spent a day in SLO, and it rained like crazy. Then we were so tired of tasting wine that we went to Paso and didn't taste much wine. And we found an old bar downtown that was fun. I can't remember the name of it. But Paso does feel to me like a small Montana town with a lot of coolness to it. I mean, but I think all of us would feel very welcome there, right? Paso is, like you said, right?
Yeah, it's very unpretentious. It's very welcoming. It's comfortable. It's like a really comfortable pair of shoes.
Yeah, I agree with that. So tell us about the terroir of Paso. So I know there's east side and west side, and you guys got your own AVAs now. And so what's your whole take on that?
Yeah, so there's the Paso AVA, and then there's about 13 that are sub AVAs. As the area's grown and people are being they're paying a little bit more attention to the terroir of each section. And it's kind of growing in that point.
Velia, can you tell us, I mean, most of us talked about this already, but terroir, kind of just, that's a French term, but what would you say in English and American, what that means, and what, kind of what your take on that whole thing is?
Terroir to me is a sense of place. It's not just the soil, it's not just the climate, it's everything that comes together to make something what it is. If you grow a strawberry in Montana, or you grow a strawberry in Santa Maria, California, it's going to taste different because of where it is. It's everything that comes together to make it that. It's almost like a cookie recipe. Like, I bet if I took your grandmother's cookie recipe, it's not going to taste like her cookie, even though it's the same recipe. So I think all of those things come together for whatever weird, magical fairy dust sort of reason to make a sense of place kind of come alive. And the terroir, Paso, I guess it depends on who you are and what you're growing, but we're lucky to have a place where we can grow anything. That's pretty amazing. But within that are some boundaries. So, the west side versus the east side of Paso versus the rest of the Central Coast, there's all these incredible little microclimates and soil types and aspects and elevations all over our county. And the two I call the Central Coast, it's two counties mostly. It's San Luis Obispo County and Santa Barbara County that make up what we call the Central Coast. And within that, we work with about 15 to 16 different vineyards within that area. And so what it gives us is a really big sort of color palette to play with. It's a mix of varietals, whether it's Santa Maria or Happy Canyon or Paso Robles or Edna Valley. But they're all incredibly different within this very small, it's maybe 150-mile radius up and down the coast. So it's pretty diverse.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like, although we talk about when we tasted a lot of wines per week, obviously, maybe 15 or 20 wines a week, 10 to 15 wines a week. And somehow, if I blind taste it, you can kind of tell it's from the Paso area because it's full fruit, it's ripe, it's, got quite a bit of alcohol usually to it because of your growing season. Like you said, strawberries or petunias or whatever are going to be different in Paso than they are anywhere else, right? So I
Right.
think you guys have a great a
Yeah.
real marking terroir.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like like I love Paso, and I love having a winery there. But a very small percentage of our grapes come from Paso. Paso gets very hot very quick, and when it comes all at once. And there's there's no forgiveness. So I think it's really important for us. We own a small vineyard in one of the Paso sub AVAs called York Mountain, which is about you were on the 101. It's about 10 miles maybe west of that towards the coast. And it's about 10 to 15 degrees cooler on a daily basis. There's a lot more fog influence, a lot more moderate temperature. And that's just within like 10 miles of downtown Paso. So there's a lot of variation there. But, typically if you think Paso, it's hot, it's dry, it's Grenache, it's Syrah, it's maybe Cab. And what we really try to do is to focus on the little areas that are kind of within our Central Coast region, but are giving us the things that we need for our grapes. I do a lot of Sauvignon Blanc. It doesn't like Paso. Paso doesn't like Sauvignon Blanc. It's too hot. So we have to really kind of pick and choose the areas that we work with to make sure that we're getting the things that are going to really highlight the qualities of that grape. But I can't think of a better place to have a winery for sure. It's, from a visitor aspect and from a collaborative and supportive community aspect.
Yeah, we have your Sauv Blanc going on our menu this summer. If
Oh, nice.
not if, when we get back open again. So we bought with everything that Eagle had, and that'll be our summer porch pounder, we like to call it.
Here's hoping we're all open in the summer.
Right, exactly.
Everybody.
So before we get on to more, I guess, technical things or whatever, tell me about what is the label thing about? How do you come up with all these fun, cool labels?
Well, if Jillian is still with us, I'm going to defer a little bit to her, but I'll give the basics. So when Desparada started, there was this desire to really kind of highlight the feminine and the masculine side of me as a person, and the brand and the wines and the art. And so we came up with, and I say we, but I didn't do any of it. I'm not going to lie. I can't even draw stick figures. I make wine. I don't do art. But we came up with these beautiful interpretations of Venus and Diana that were taken from old French paintings. And then we put them onto completely unrelated, very industrial style backgrounds. And then we made dresses out of nudes, pen and pencil drawings of nudes, to cover the nude women. And through time, these have just kind of morphed into what we call our stalwart series of just really beautiful women. And Jillian and our friend Cameron that works with us as well, that's what they do full time, is make us look cool and create all these beautiful stickers. It's really, really important to me that what is on the outside of the bottle is as beautiful as what's inside of the bottle. We work really, really hard to make our wines. And if you just slap a sticker on it that doesn't have a lot of thought behind it, it doesn't do it justice. So, and from a retail aspect, the thing that people are going to do to pull it off a shelf and to buy it for that first time without knowing it is how good it looks. It's like dating.
Oh, really? Do you want to go there, or you want
No, I don't. No, we're good.
That's what I would think. So tell us, I was at your winery at about 8:30 on I think a Sunday night when it was closed, because we didn't get there till 8:30 and closed at 8. But we saw the outside. It seemed nice. What's going on in the winery? Tell us about, whatever, oak and bottling and aging and whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. So right now it's kind of thank goodness that what's happening in the world is happening right now, because if it was harvest or bottling, it would really suck. But thankfully, this is a really quiet time for us. So we just finished bottling in February. We bottle twice a year, February and August. The wine that we're tasting tonight, the 16 Suitor, this spent about 20 months in oak. And so we do some that are about 12 to 15 months, and then we give things a little bit more extended time. So right now we're in this in-between period where we just finished bottling. We're keeping everything topped. We are.
Oh, so what you're saying is everything is perfect in California. The sun's out. You don't really have to work. You're not missing any income. us poor souls in Montana still are doing
I
this.
wish.
No.
I wish. You know, it is a huge adjustment. You know, our tasting rooms are closed. Most of our distribution has closed shop for the time being, or just at least temporarily. And so we're kind of working on this really kind of weird period where I'm like, what do we need to deep clean today? Like, let's clean the office. Let's tackle that inventory, you know, issue that we've had for a while, like just kind of digging into the deeper stuff. But thankfully it is a quieter time of year. So usually now is the time when we're out visiting distributors and doing distributor visits. And those are all on hold for the time being. So
We're
yeah,
kind of doing that tonight.
you know what? We are doing that.
Right.
Yeah. And saving on the airfare. So I'm really grateful for that, but it's, yeah, it's just, it's an adjustment.
Yeah, I agree. For all of us.
I'm sure for everybody.
We try not to talk about that because this is supposed to be a half hour, 45-minute escape from all that stuff.
Right.
We'll all get back to our life, right? So tell us about kind of the wine and glass and what you're smelling, what you're thinking, what I find with Paso or your wines in particular is the texture is different to me than a lot of other wines that I taste. Like you can actually feel it on your tongue more than like we did White Rose Pinot Noir on Saturday night. I loved it. It was one of my favorite wines of the whole tasting, but this is a whole different texture on the palate.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a big compliment. That's one thing that we definitely go for because a wine has to feel good in your mouth to me. Like it can't just taste good, but it also needs to feel good and have texture and have weight. And, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about alcohol and, you know, that's never something that you really want to talk heavily about because it, you know, but one thing that it does bring to the party is mouthfeel and weight. And that is something that our region, you know, like we have to work hard to get the most out of the flavor and to be able to temper that back though and not have it too high, but also allow for it to kind of provide a lot of that texture. Another thing that we do to add weight and volume to a wine is to, we stir lees a lot. So starting, you know.
Explain that.
What's that?
Explain that.
Yep. So lees are the, when the yeast eats the sugar and then dies and floats to the bottom of the barrel, it creates lees. And those provide a lot of interesting things. And so what we do at Desparada, especially with whites and also with reds, is we stir those. So we have this long metal stir stick and we stick it in the barrel and we stir it like this every day until it's exhausting. And I think that adds a lot of texture and weight to the wine. We never rack it off of those lees until it's time for bottling. So a lot of wineries will do like a rack to kind of clean things up, and racking just means moving wine from one barrel or one vessel to another. So a lot of the times it's racked from one to another, let it settle out, let it kind of clarify and clear up. We don't filter anything. So, you know, we want it to be as clear as possible, but we also want to get as much out of it as possible. So we don't rack it.
So when we're in the restaurant world or in the retail world, we're in both. You see those sometimes at the end of a bottle, there's some sediment left over and people freak out about it and they shouldn't, right? And so that is the lees that are not fined or filtered out.
It's lees and it's tartrates. It's like acid deposits. It's different minerals and things that are in acids that are forming deposits and kind of settling out. But yeah, they're not bad. They're good. We like them.
Well, you don't really want to drink them.
You don't want to drink them.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't taste good in your mouth. You work hard to avoid them, but they also brought beautiful things to it, and so you wouldn't want to disregard them.
And natural wine which is a big controversial term, but I mean, if you're fining and filtering, maybe you could talk about that. I don't think anybody's talked about that in 15 days.
Yeah.
Like what happens to wine if you don't do it completely naturally, like.
Yeah, and you're right. It's a really vague term. Like we don't actually have a lot of regulation, so I guess you could say, yeah, natural. Who knows? For me, natural means that I'm not adding any additives. We're not fining. We're not filtering. We don't even inoculate.
What is fining and filtering?
Yeah. Okay. So good question. So fining is something that you use to clarify a wine. So back in the day, early on, you could use things like egg whites for fining. So albumin. You could use. They used bull's blood They used fish scales. They used a lot of things. And now there are synthetic products or naturally derived products that you can use. But essentially it's to help clarify a wine or to help soften some edges. It's supposed to make the wine better. My opinion, to make the wine right the first time, and you don't have to fix it on the back end. And if it's not, then enjoy its uniquities or uniqueness. Filtration is usually used for clarifying. We don't bother with that either. But it does take some hand selling from a restaurant or retail aspect. Like, why is the wine a little bit cloudy? Yeah, right. Here's why it's cloudy. But we have found, and we've done a lot of trials with it. I've done distribution trials. We've done bench trials. I find for me that filtering especially, it strips away some flavors and it strips away some weight and some mouthfeel. And so for me, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I agree with that. We had one from Domaine Roy up in the Willamette Valley that I think it was 2013, and it was as cloudy as hell. Like, seriously, like you couldn't see through it, which in a Pinot Noir, generally you can see your fingers through the glass.
Right.
And you couldn't see your fingers, and people were freaking out. I'm like, well, don't freak out about it. Taste it.
Taste it. Yeah,
exactly. So,
yeah.
Let's talk about
yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to say it's a lot of that is educating, right? For us and for our clients and for everybody. It's just not what we're used to necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you buy a normal grocery store wine, it's going to be completely see-through and, not have no cloudiness whatsoever, no tartrates, no anything left in the sediment in the bottom of the glass. But yeah, I think when I see that, it means to me it's a real wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
I agree.
So how about the wine in our glass? So this is Cabernet Sauvignon, Sangiovese, Cabernet Franc, and all of us are always interested. Like I think probably most of us are good cooks on this. I mean, if you're into wine, you're probably a foodie. And
I think so.
Yeah, so we know how to add salt or pepper or Parmesan or whatever we know. But it's interesting to us, like this is an odd blend to me. I don't see Sangiovese much in Cabernet Cab Franc. So tell us about what that story is and why you did it.
Yeah. So and my husband likes to say, like, cooking is, especially for him and for both of us too, like neither of us have a very technical background. We came to wine from the applicable side, from tasting and from being hands-on and from a sensory standpoint versus from a chemistry background. And wine is like cooking, like you taste, you feel, you see what you need to adjust and how you're going to do that. But Sangio, I love Italian varietals. So I do a lot of Bordeaux and then I do a lot of Italian. When I say a lot though, there's not much grown around here. So when I say a lot, it comprises 15% of my production if I'm lucky. It's hard to find. It's not very marketable. And so there's not a lot of it grown, but it's one of my favorites to work with because they naturally have such incredible acidity and tannin, which is something that, especially in a warmer climate like where we live, that can be a real challenge. Cabs, Syrahs, Grenache, they can really struggle for acidity. And if you love to eat, you love to cook, or you love to drink, it's nice to have that acid. It balances that fruit and makes the wine really enjoyable. And with the Italian varietals, you would never even need to add anything. They just do it naturally. So for me, Cab and Sangio is a very normal. It's a very it's like the perfect pairing. First time I did that was in 2010.
What does Sangiovese add to this blend, in your opinion?
The acidity. The bright red kind of cranberry fruit, it kind of lifts up the darkness of the Cab. It adds that kind of backbone of structure. The Cab Franc in there, it's 4%. It was half a barrel. It was already there. She was cute. I left her. It's fine. But really the basis of the structure is the tannin of the Cab and the acid of the Sangiovese.
Where's the Sangiovese from?
It's from White Hawk Vineyard, which is down in it's Los Alamos, actually, if you know where that is. So kind of like it's Santa Barbara County, right before it hits to be San Luis County.
So much cooler climate than what you guys have up in Paso?
Not much. I mean, it's cooler, but it's not crazy. It's not crazy cool. It's not like Edna Valley or Santa Maria. It's more moderated by the coast. It gets pretty hot there. Yeah, and it's got some pretty good elevation. White Hawk's a really cool vineyard. It's a really dark clone of Sangiovese as well. I've been getting this since 2010, and it's it's a really interesting. It's a great blender. It's great on its own. Every year, it's one of my favorite grapes to work with because it's really versatile.
what other, so I know Tara sent out an email today about what we have available in the distribution network to make my wife more wealthy than she is. And you, I mean, the only ones that get locked out of this are the poor retailers, right? Anyway, tell us about some of your other favorite wines from Desparada, if you would.
So out of 3,500 cases that I make a year, we bottle about 15 to 18 different SKUs, which is a lot. But I feel like a lot of those really warrant their own attention. So most of those are really small bottlings. Out of that, I'd say about 6 to 10 per year are Sauvignon Blancs, which I'm a big fan of, obviously. And those vary from different vineyards throughout the Central Coast, different vessels. I do a lot with terracotta amphora that we import from Italy. So these big giant clay pots that we make wine in. We do a little bit in concrete, French oak barrels, acacia. So those are all really, really fun. And I think that, I think it's great to get people re-excited about something that they maybe never got excited about. Sauvignon Blanc is one of those things for me. We really try to.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Explain the difference between, so we think Sauvignon Blanc in America is Kim Crawford or Whitehaven or whatever from New Zealand, and Loire Valley, when you finally get into Sauvignon Blanc in the wine world, is kind of muted, and then California has its own style. So why did you fall in love with Sauvignon Blanc, and what's your style of Sauvignon Blanc, or is there one particular style you have?
There's not one particular style. I try to really, we talked about mouthfeel and texture earlier, and about stirring lees, and about highlighting the qualities of the grape. So I think that we really try to focus on that. Typically, Sauv Blanc is kind of like the Pinot Grigio of the States, where it's inexpensive, it's acidic, sometimes bracingly so, where it rips the enamel off your teeth, but it's not offensive, and it's an easy drinker. And I really wanted people to fall in love with Sauv Blanc again, which for me was why I made Fragment, and why I try to keep the price on it really low, because that is a very acid-driven, full-bodied and textured wine that can pair with anything or nothing. And I think that they can really, it's a very, again, versatile grape that displays a lot. So that's really important to me. Fall in love with Sauv Blanc again.
Yeah, I agree. So I always tell people, if you're going to a bad bar, maybe that one downtown Paso Robles where they probably don't have great wine.
Pine Street Saloon. I know exactly what you were talking about. Yeah.
Order a Pinot Grigio if you have to have wine or whatever, have a cocktail. But Pinot Grigio, they never mess with Pinot Grigio. They don't try to oak it. They don't make it sweet. Like they just make it.
They put it in stainless steel. They make it dry, and it's not offensive, and it's fine, and that's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to go back to the Sauvignon Blanc just being a good everyday drinking, right?
Yeah, it's a porch pounder. Like, don't screw it up. Don't make it painfully, like, it should just be something that is enjoyable. And that's my beer of choice. I'm not a beer drinker, so I call Sauv Blanc my beer of choice, because when I come home, I open a bottle of Sauv Blanc. It's also low enough alcohol so that I can have a glass or two and not, it's fine. Right. It's acceptable. Right. I have a 5-year-old. It's fine. But it can be beautiful. It can be, an incredibly expensive, expressive. It can be this, and it can also just be simple. It doesn't need to be fancy. Yeah.
We had a good question from a friend of mine. I can't believe he's this bright to even ask this question, but it says, what other winemakers do you admire? In your area, I guess.
Oh, in my area?
Well, no, you can go worldwide. I don't care.
Well, worldwide, my first and foremost is Foradori, which is an Italian winemaker. She does a lot with amphora. She does a lot with natural wines, but they're really well made. Sometimes natural wine has this connotation where they're not something you necessarily want to drink. Sometimes they're a little oxidized. Sometimes they're just too funky, even for me. And that's cool for a minute. It's very hipstery, but it's, I want to drink it and enjoy it too. So I love her wines because they are incredibly well made. They are clean. They are gorgeous. But she's also she's a badass. She's awesome. Locally, God, Jim Clendenin. He's been around for a long time and been doing it right for a long time.
Seriously, like from the 70s or something, right?
Yeah, no, the real deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
John Albin, who's, our neighbor, but again, somebody that really, really cares and has been doing it the right way for a long time. Like we drive by his vineyard all the time, and it is impeccable. And he does a lot for the community. And I don't know, I think it's all those things. It's not just the wine. It's like who you are as a person. And those are some of our local wine crushes. Epic, Jordan Fiorentini from Epic Wines here in Paso. She's a really cool chick and makes really gorgeous wines and is a nice person.
When I do my own wine tastings, I talk about, I grew up in farm country in Montana, and we had the Barches, and they had the most perfect farm in the world. Everything, all the equipment is perfectly maintained. All the barns are painted well, and you drive by that place, you're like, wow. And then you drive by my relatives, which are the Zimmelmans, and there's junk cars everywhere, and there's combines that are beat up, and they're not doing anything to try to maintain their. When I was in Europe, I thought, well, what they do is they send the Zimmelman wine to America, and they keep the Barch wine in Europe. So yeah, I get what you're talking about. I mean, when you're in wine country, you understand who really is trying to do it right, and those that are just kind of cutting corners and doing whatever, right?
But it's also, there's a fine line too. Like sometimes you don't need the most expensive thing to make the best wine. Like there's some people here that are incredibly wealthy and have all of the best things. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they have the heart and soul behind it. So I really think that it requires both of those things. Like, sure, I would love to have big fancy tanks and glycol and stuff like that, and we don't. But I think you still have to take a lot of painstaking care to make the best product that you can. There's some simple basic rules that you have to follow from a cleanliness aspect, but you have to have the passion and the heart and soul behind it, or it doesn't matter.
Right. I agree with that. So tell us about Herman's Story. I know you and your husband have both these wineries, and Herman's Story is also part of the portfolio that Eagle has. So can you give us a little story about that quickly?
Yeah, I'll give you hey.
I know, right?
I love how many neighbors you have. You've waved like 74 times, and it's awesome.
Everybody's more friendly now, right?
I'll give you the G-rated version because the way I met my husband was not G-rated, but no, I'm just kidding. It was fine. We dated very loosely. It's fine. But he's one of the most genuine, funny, like sweet men I've ever met, and he's also a really badass winemaker, which is how I first met him. I tasted one of his Syrahs, Nuts and Bolts. Actually, I took it to a blind tasting, and it won hands down. And I was like, "Who's this gentleman? Hello." And that was kind of it. That was 12 years ago, and he's a really good person that cares about what he's making. Yeah, so maybe you'll highlight him as well, but. At the end of the day, it's great that we make different varietals. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass being in the same business as your partner, as I'm sure you kind of understand. But it's also really great.
Don't give me any deals at all on wine. Like she charged me the same price she charges everybody else. Right?
What?
I know.
State law.
Disgusting.
But it's great. Sometimes one night he said, God, I wish you worked for a bank. And I said, I wish you worked for a bank. Like, sometimes it's hard because you come home and you talk about those things, but then at the same time, that's really beautiful. Like, it's great to be able to ask his opinion, to discuss our true passions. Even though, during harvest time, it's a real scramble for how we're going to work all that, but it works out. Luckily we have, that's the other aspect of what we do, is that we are able to share our staff, our employees, the people that we work with, and they're all awesome, amazing. And so we're really, really lucky to be able to, everyone works together to pull this thing off every day.
Well, I think I'm about out of questions. I've enjoyed myself, and thank you so much. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Or Bailey, do you want to add anything?
Thank you again for having me. This is great. I appreciate it.
It was fun, yeah. So we have, Tara will send out the email in just a little bit. We have quite a bit of her wine and Herman's Story wine available to us. And thank you so much for supporting us. And Heather Jackson from Eagle has been nothing but a gem. She delivers wine every day for us, which is, I guess, maybe her only job at this point. I don't know. She has been amazing and helped us so much. And we're going to have, we were talking about this beer tasting thing. But there's not much money in it. We might have to charge $100 a glass of wine, I think.
For beer?
Sorry. Right. We're making way more money by this wine thing. So we might keep going on with wine and beer.
Do the wine thing.
Oh, yeah,
it's a bigger margin.
We're doing beer next week, Delia. I don't know. I don't know anything about beer. Do you know anything about beer, Delia?
I don't drink it.
I know. Well, we'll make it up.
Toby said 1, 2 Tuan beers. Nope, 2 beers. There we go. Drinking and typing is bad. I don't drink beer. I drink cider and dry cider, and I drink wine, and that's the extent for me.
You have a 5-year-old, right? You said?
Yeah, she'll be 5 in June.
Yeah, that's not good to drink when you have a 5-year-old.
It's definitely changed.
I have a 35-year-old.
And who's Hazel?
Oh, Tara's gone now. Hazel's my daughter. And she had on a Desparada shirt. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Awesome. I didn't see it.
Jillian sent her a Desparada shirt today. Right.
A little onesies.
Yep, exactly.
That's great. That's great.
All right, I think we're going to be over and out unless anybody has anything else. Good.
I love seeing all the notes. Thank you guys, everyone, for supporting both myself and Mark and Kathy, and thanks for dialing in, zooming in. I don't know what's the terminology.
Probably zooming. Yeah.
Thanks for zooming in.
It's that whole Magnum tonight. You save some for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long one, guys. Yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
I got this. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.